Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone who have joined us for this policy dialogue from different parts of the world. I welcome you all to this high level policy dialogue on the deciphering nexus of poverty eradication, food security, and climate change, organized by India Water Foundation, supported by Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, under the aegis of UN Ecosoc Partnership Forum 2024. Over 1 billion people in the world today live in unacceptable conditions of poverty, mostly in developing countries, particularly in rural areas of low income countries all around the world. More than 80% of the world's extreme poor live in rural areas at rates nearly 3 times higher than among urban residents. Poverty has various manifestations, and hunger and malnutrition is the severest of them. Hunger is the result of many factors: mismanagement of food production and distribution, poor accessibility, maldistribution of financial resources, unwise exploitation of natural resources, unstable pattern of consumption, conflicts between traditional and contemporary production systems, irrational population growth, and armed conflicts. All of these are further exacerbated by climate change, resulting in increasing global temperatures, unpredictable precipitation patterns, and intensified extreme weather events, which further leads to low agricultural yields, inflated prices, and forms a vicious cycle. So, how do we come out of this vicious cycle? What are the transformations we need at policy and implementation levels to combat these challenges? To analyze the same, we have organized this event, bringing together leaders and experts from multidimensional organizations to deliberate and serve as a space for discussions and recommendations to gather support for joint action towards the 2030 agenda. To initiate this session, I request Dr. Arvind Kumar, President, India Water Foundation, to set up the tone for this event. Dr. Kumar is a strategist and key influencer in development sector with more than 28 years of experience as an author, columnist, water activist, and human rights proactivist, and specializes in concepts like ecosystem-based adaptation, water energy food nexus, with specific emphasis on transversal approach of interlinkages between water, environment, and SDGs. He has published over 500 plus research articles in several books. He is a proud recipient of Achievers Award for his contribution to environment from International Human Rights Organization in collaboration with United Nations Information Center, India. Dr. Kumar, please.
Thank you, Sweta. Good evening, good morning, everyone. Shri Garin Singh Shekhawat ji, Honorable Minister of Jal Shakti, Government of India. Ji Ms. Lin Yang, Deputy Executive Secretary of UNESCAP. Ms. Susan Garden, Director, Ecosystem Division, UNEP. Mr. Shombi Sharp, UN Resident Coordinator, India. Mr. Satya Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. Ms. Dani, Teacher International Policy Advisor, Swedish Waterhouse CV, and Mr. Sanjeev Bhucher, Senior Watershed Management Specialist, ICMU. I welcome you all to this high-level policy dialogue. The Honorable Minister shall present the development in water sector that the Government of India has brought through their various missions and programs, and how this nexus has eased the life of general public at large, especially in the rural areas and of the marginalized. The increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather conditions threaten livelihoods around the world in direct and indirect ways. Shifting and unpredictable weather patterns in seasons, increasing average temperature, drought, flooding, tropical cyclones, hurricanes, and rising sea level are some of the climate change events that continue to jeopardize lives, infrastructure, housing, source of food, income, and basic services of the many families, though amplifying their risks to increase poverty and hunger. As per the report on the agriculture development, food security and nutrition, some 29.6% of the global population, that is around 2.4 billion people, were moderately or severely food insecure in 2020. 391 million more than in 2019, with more women and people in the rural areas denied access in safe, nutritious, and sufficient food year round. While the impact of the climate change is present globally, some regions and certain communities are already experiencing disproportionately effects. Climate change is also expected to negatively affect agriculture yields and production. Changes in agriculture production directly impact human welfare because agriculture forms an important part of the economics of the majority of the countries. An increase in the floods and the droughts would not only make farming unpredictable and difficult, but is also directly lead to a food security crisis. It makes it much harder to feed people. As a result, food price will hike, make it harder for more people to have access to food, thus increasing the risk of hunger and poverty. Between 2.5 and 3 billion people depend on at least partly on agriculture for their livelihoods. Most of these rural households are both poor and hunger. Why SDG 1 and SDG 2 are intricately interdependent, and now SDG 13 is also affecting us all. To balance the combined pressure of climate change and growing populations, we need to re-evaluate what we eat, where, how it's grown. We have to find ways to increase productivity, farm incomes, because they are key to addressing both poverty and hunger. This is a problem that concerns us all. Halting climate change is only possible by reducing our emissions and become more resilient. But doing so often required major social, economic, and technological change. Nature itself is often the best way to protect both people and planet. Rehabilitating ecosystems help to reduce people's uh, vulnerability to climate shocks and stresses while also protecting biodiversity and promoting social cohesion. So this dialogue will try to decipher the nexus of food insecurity, climate change, and poverty. All the eminent speakers will present their perspectives, and the deliberations and the recommendation would help us in understanding the problem and finding issues, as it is an integration of agencies and multi-stakeholders. While government are responsible for reducing poverty in their countries, the potential of national civil society organization in solving social problems uh, in the areas they work in allow to be effective partners in the elevating poverty and combating climate change. The future must be built on the top-down and bottom-up systems thinking approaches, political will for the transformation, policies, programs, and investments, promoting policies, cohesion, and policies that drive real change. We have to harvest and the opportunities that the agriculture and food system offer to lift people out of the poverty. Thank you.
You are on mute. Shweta, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I hope you all can hear me now. Now I call Shri Gajendra Singh Shekhawat ji, Union Minister of Jal Shakti of the Government of India, for his chair address, stressing on the achievements and progress made by India on this crucial nexus. His address has been shared with us in form of a video that I would be playing for you.
Namaskar. I extend my heartiest congratulations to the India Water Foundation and all partners associated for organizing this high-level policy dialogue. It is a happy coincidence that this program has been organized at a time when our government has completed 9 years in office under the visionary leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. In these 9 years, India has taken concrete steps to not only significantly improve the lives of its people, but also to combat climate change, achieve sustainable development goals, and preserve the country's rich biodiversity. Under Honorable Prime Minister's illustrious leadership, the country is marching forward to improve the quality of life and enhance ease of living of people, especially those residing in the rural areas. The larger goal is to bridge the gap between urban and rural in terms of basic amenities. With this vision, in his first address to Independence Day, that was 15th August 2014, the Prime Minister announced the Swachh Bharat mission to make India an open defecation-free country by 2019. It's a matter of great pride that on 2nd October 2019, the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi ji, India declared itself open defecation free. The result of sanitation campaign have been mind-boggling. A WHO study estimated that the Swachh Bharat mission resulted in averting more than 3 lakhs deaths, mostly of children, caused by diarrhea and protein energy malnutrition. Another study by UNICEF estimated that open defecation free villages in India resulted in saving of US $750 per household per annum, close to $88 billion saving on out-of-pocket healthcare expenditure incurred by households per annum. From the ramparts of Red Fort on 15th August 2019, Honorable Prime Minister announced another life-transforming scheme called Jal Jeevan Mission. Its objectives was to provide safe tap water connections to every household by 2024, with focus on quality, quantity, and reliability of safe drinking water. I am happy to inform you that JJM's aim to reach all rural households by 2024 is 6 years well ahead of the Sustainable Development Goals 6 targeted, and could become a model for other developing countries to adopt such practice and achieve their SDG 6 target. Today we have already achieved more than 64% of our target by providing tap water connections to more than 124 million households. Jal Jeevan Mission is being implemented through a bottoms-up approach. For each village, an integrated village action plan which includes drinking water source strengthening, water supply infrastructure, grey water treatment and reuse, regular operations, maintenance and responsibilities is prepared with the help of water supply, public health engineers and local NGO self-help groups, etc. The mission focuses on empowering the local village community by constituting village water and sanitation committees to work as local public utility. The provision of household tap connections in rural areas has ended the drudgery of women and girls who were forced to walk long distances in search of water. This finds reference in the recently released WHO report that providing tap connections to every household would result in significant time saved on water collection, 66.6 million houses each day, especially among women. The precious time saved, especially by women, has provided them an opportunity to undertake economic activities, thereby adding the family income and resulting in reduction in poverty. Safe access to potable water within the household has also improved the health parameters in terms of control of waterborne diseases, as has been confirmed by World Health Organization's report released by Dr. Roderico Ofrin, WHO representatives to India. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, while addressing COP26 at Glasgow in November 21, introduced the concept of life, which stands for lifestyle for environment. Soon this concept was followed into action agenda with the joint launch of Mission Life by United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres along with Prime Minister Modi in October 2022. I would like to conclude by saying that while in the last 9 years we have worked hard in the water and sanitation sector, a big role has been played by the widespread public participation. Our success is big in the sense that we have been able to create a nationwide mass movement regarding water and sanitation. With this experience in mass movement, I can say with certainty that we will have to move forward with a concrete framework in the direction of mass world participation. Come, let us all work together with a resolve to build a strong and beautiful world and fulfill our duties towards world and humanity. Thank you all.
As always, Shri Shekhawatji's address was balanced and up to the mark. Now, my second speaker is the co-chair of this event, Ms. Lin Yang. She is Deputy Executive Secretary for Program of Escape and brings over 23 years of experience as a diplomat and staff of the United Nations. She joins us from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, where she provided advice on intergovernmental processes as well as follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Addis Ababa Action Agenda, Samoa Pathway, and Quadrennial Comprehensive Policy Review as the head of Strategic Planning and Communication Services, Office of the Under Secretary General of the United Nations. Ms. Yang, please.
Thank you, Sruava, and thank you, Dr. Kumar, and the dear colleagues and the dear participants, and dear guests. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm very honored to join you today to discuss some of the most urgent issues of our time. Tackling climate change, overcoming poverty, and ending hunger are the defining challenges facing countries in the Asia-Pacific region. These challenges are deeply intertwined, presenting an extremely complex picture in finding solutions by our member states in this region. Furthermore, the impacts are straining biophysical systems, including land, water, ecological system, thereby exacerbating food insecurity. The convergence of these challenges is undoing the gains in sustainable development that have been made in recent decades. So I would like to take today's opportunity to share 3 observations and 3 key recommendations. And let me first of all dive into the issue from 3 perspectives. First, the disproportionate impact on vulnerable populations. Despite contributing the least to emissions, impoverished and vulnerable communities bear the brunt of the consequences with the limited options to cope and adapt. Let me give an example. In 2022, global food price reached all-time highs, pushing millions into poverty. 4 out of every 10 people in the world can't afford a healthy diet. This number goes as high as 3 out of every 4 in South Asia. Ironically, many of the food insecure people are the very ones who produce food. Smallholder farmers who produce 85% of the world's food, as well as urban poor and other vulnerable populations, including women and children. Second, climate change as a threat multiplier. Climate change further intensified food system risks and worsens existing poverty and inequality. Our analysis finds out the inequality across countries and within countries are widening. Heat waves, droughts, floods are especially impactful for low and middle income countries, where many people depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, and where adaptive capacity is generally low. Emerging issues such as melting glaciers in Central Asia and the Hindu Kush Himalaya region are also posing increasing threats to the food, water, energy nexus, and human security. Overall, it's predicted that global warming will lead to a 20% rise in global food prices by 2050, hurting the poorest populations. Third, overlook the role of food system in climate discussions. Food systems contribute to as much as 1/3 of all global greenhouse gas emissions, and yet only 3% of public climate finance is directed to this sector. Food systems have long been overlooked in global climate discussions for a multitude of reasons. Like food systems are complex and involve multiple stakeholders, from multinational corporations to smallholder farmers and consumers, making the coordination action very challenging. The traditional siloed approach to food security strategies and the limited representation of agri-food and smallholder interests in climate negotiations all contribute to the historical oversight of the climate food link in global policy forum and the lack of the progress across all the SDGs. The good news is that we are starting to see some breakthroughs. Food systems were brought into the agenda of COP28 in a more integrated manner than ever. And I believe that our FAO colleagues can share more with us, if not today. Indeed, risks in the food, climate, macroeconomic nexus are cross-border and cross-sector in nature, which will require multinational and multi-sectoral solutions. So in this context, I would like to highlight 3 key recommendations for driving changes to manage the complex challenges ahead. Number 1, build data-informed and science-based resilience. It's critical to scale up the use of data to support adaptation investments and the resilience building strategies, which are risk-informed. Here in ASCAP, by working with the WFP, we developed the risk and the resilience portal, as well as our food system risk assessment framework. We call it INFA, built on data from various sectors to generate insights on multidimensional climate and the food system risks. Second, strengthen cross-sectoral public-private partnerships. Partnerships that aligns interests and values, that harness diverse expertise and perspectives, open the way for innovation. Several countries in Asia and the Pacific have taken successful strides in this regard. For example, public-private partnerships in Bangladesh, India, and the Philippines have categorized small and smart and low-carbon farming approaches, while Singapore has advanced in renewables and water efficiency. In Thailand and Pakistan, agri-tech companies are supporting small-scale farmers in access to finance. Finally, leverage inclusive regional and multilateral collaboration. The cross-border and the cross-sector nature of the risks in the food, climate, and macroeconomic nexus calls for inclusive regional and multilateral collaboration. This collaboration should emphasize enhancing solidarity to ensure that no one is left behind. ASCAP, as the most inclusive intergovernmental platform in Asia and the Pacific, works tirelessly to connect diverse stakeholders, promoting climate-smart trade, inclusive business models, and regional actions on issues ranging from that, energy connectivity, and to air pollution and energy transition. So stay tuned to our Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, which will take place on the 20th to 23rd February. Excellencies and dear participants, today's event serves as a very important platform for collective engagement and shared understanding. I think discussions among ourselves already demonstrate this importance. So this dialogue, why I feel that is quite pivotal, because this year, the food security goal number 1, poverty, number 2, hunger, and the climate, number 13, and the goal number 17 on partnership will be under review by the high-level political forum. So this dialogue is pivotal in advancing progress towards addressing the complex and interconnectedness crisis that define our future. We already started discussion. Time is the most important and precious things, and the collaboration is key to achieving the SDGs. I really look forward to this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for your to-the-point recommendations. My next speaker is Dr. Susan Gardner, who, with over 3 decades of experience as Director of the Ecosystems Division of the UN Environment Program, where she leads global programs to promote nature-based solutions for sustainable development, including for food systems transformations, climate resilience, global biodiversity protection, and disaster risk reduction. She was awarded the Gold Medal for Exceptional Services from the US Environmental Protection Agency, the highest honor. She will speak about UNEP's role and initiatives on this nexus. Ms. Gardner, please.
Well, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to hear from the previous speakers that have done such an excellent job of laying out the case for partnership, for immediate urgent action, for science, rich data. And I'd like to add my voice to the importance of these partnerships and a bit about the experience that UNEPs have. It's really a pleasure to join you from our headquarters here in Nairobi. And we have noticed and learned that facilitating and catalyzing partnerships that include all the relevant stakeholders at every level is the surest way in building partnerships that protect the environment, but also building resilience and enhancing livelihoods that truly respond to the local realities. We've heard a very good case made from the previous speakers that unsustainable agricultural practices are a major driver of land use change and ecosystem degradations. We know they account for about 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions and about 80% of biodiversity loss and deforestation. And then at the same time, we know, and we've heard the case very well, that these threats posed by ecosystem degradation and climate change are acutely felt in those communities that depend on agriculture for food security and livelihood. So there's this bi-directional relationship. And this relationship between food systems, ecosystems loss, climate change, this makes it all the more important to accelerate the transition towards sustainable agricultural practices, to protect and restore degraded ecosystems and biodiversity, and truly leverage the power of nature-based solutions, of indigenous knowledge, and of these very valuable and powerful partnerships in an inclusive way. Fortunately, we've never had more information. We've never had more political will or more resources at our disposal than I think we find today. And at COP28, for example, we saw leaders reaffirming their commitment to targets that were outlined under the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as from the Food Systems Summit. We heard this through speeches and declarations that demonstrate a growing recognition of the urgent need to scale up integrated and coherent solutions. We have a lot of partnerships in trying to meet this cause. In partnership with FAO, UNEP is working through the decade on ecosystem restoration to provide practical guidance and for framework for stakeholders to be able to advance progress on interconnected priorities to restore productive ecosystems while ensuring that food, climate, and environmental security is clearly protected. At the same time, we create economic opportunities to lift people out of poverty. And in particular, we can also look at other situations like the work we do with UNDP, where we've developed guidance and resources to support member states and other stakeholders to develop integrated policy on environment, climate, and poverty. For example, the Poverty Environment Action Malawi project, which was implemented in partnership with the Malawian government, with UNDP, with FAO, and UN Women, developed multiple tools to address this nexus of environment, climate, and poverty. And those tools and those resources were used to support a number of initiatives that had real results, that had results in terms of improving crop yields, food security, livelihoods for communities on the ground. So this is true impact for people. But currently we've seen way too often that agriculture and food policies are developed in silos, in fragmented ways, using narrow lenses that measure success like yield per hectare or per capita production. And what we actually need is a joined up nexus type of thinking that connects the dots across the entire value chain, which is why right now this dialogue is so important. We need to understand all the dimensions of the impacts and the dependencies across all the value chain. And through the Economics of Ecosystem and Biodiversity Initiative, known as TEEB, we can use true cost accounting and put a dollar value on nature and ecosystem services and the many cross-cutting benefits that they provide for people. Our TEEB agri-food evaluation framework focuses specifically on food systems and has been applied to more than a dozen countries, including ongoing projects that we have in India in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare and the Ministry of Environment, Forests, and Climate Change. And this initiative, it's offered the world real evidence to scale up sustainable agricultural solutions that have revealed where enabling policies on organic farming and agroforests were introduced, we saw soil erosion rates can be decreased by up to 7%. We saw carbon sequestration potential can rise 7.5% by just 2050, with an economic value of more than $200 million US. We also saw improvements in the amount of fresh water available for human use, which we heard such an important situation described by the minister. And this can provide more than $3.5 billion in value by 2050. And we also learned that soil health and microbial populations can increase 5-fold just from the right types of sustainable practices. Now, we've heard the previous speakers talk a lot about gender. In our TEEB assessments in Uttar Pradesh, we've revealed that where sustainable agricultural practices are employed, 43% of the female workforce were involved in decision-making, which is more than double what you often find in conventional farming. So this provides a clear evidence base to inform policy and demonstrating that sustainable food systems and economic restoration, ecosystem restoration deliver compound benefits, bringing us closer to the 2030 targets, the targets on gender, on ecosystem and biodiversity, the targets on climate change, and on economic development and poverty alleviation. And such information provides that knowledge base for stakeholders that's essential to undertake the changes that are needed. But at the same time, of course, we do know that much more funding is essential to advance the extensive transformations that are required to meet the 2030 goals, which has been estimated to require around $250 billion per year by 2030. So I'd also like to leave you with 3 critical areas that we think can truly help to unlock the full potential of food systems transformation and ecosystem restoration. And the first one is that financial flows must increase. And this should be informed by a robust evidence base of established best practices. leveraging effective multi-level partnerships to ensure the integrity and the value of food systems transformations, and also to ensure that finance reaches those on the front lines, particularly the smallholder farmers who produce 1/3 of the world's food. Now, second, joined up, all of government policy commitments are needed to ensure coherence across all sectors, and this includes leveraging data and technology to inform policy, providing regulatory and financial certainty to those that have the task of undertaking these transformations, and truly having a disincentive of those sectors and practices that negatively impact climate, nature, and people. And third, policy approaches should keep national commitments and internationally agreed targets at their focus. The GBF is one of our roadmaps. The Paris Agreement is a roadmap. The SDGs are a roadmap. It's essential that all of our efforts are bringing us closer to these collective goals. So, just in conclusion, 80% of the world's poorest and most food insecure people live in rural areas and rely on agriculture for their very livelihoods. And our current approach to food systems leaves those communities exposed to the human and economic impacts of ecosystem loss and climate change. And those communities can secure more productive and resilient futures with the right enabling condition and a healthy environment. We've never been more informed or better equipped to unlock the value of productive ecosystems and sustainable food systems, and doing so can rapidly bring us closer to multiple developmental goals. The transformation will require ambitious collaborations and partnership across value chains, across sectors and communities, and coherent policies that support harmonious transitions. So by working together at a true pace and scale to shift the paradigm towards one that values nature and social capital, we can build a nature-positive future that supports life, well-being, and livelihood for all of us today and for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your wonderful recommendations. And I'm sure that as you've already spoken about data, as Lynn also spoke about it, I think it's one of the most important things if we want to have proper policies. Data is the most important thing, of course, driven by technology and innovation. My next speaker on this is Mr. Shombi Shah, UN Resident Coordinator for India. He has devoted more than 25 years of his career to promoting inclusive and sustainable development internationally. He is a published author of works in health, economics, as well as nominee for the UNDP Administrators Award. He would highlight how UN as a whole is engaging with multi-sectors and partnerships in India, especially.
Dear friends, colleagues in India and around the world, namaste and greetings from Delhi. On behalf of the UN in India, I wish to thank the India Water Foundation and GASP for organizing this important session in the Ecosoc Partnership Forum on how multi-stakeholder partnerships can drive poverty eradication, food security, and climate action. Friends, just days ago, we closed our eyes on 2023 and probably all wish to open them again to a new year no longer facing a crisis wherever we look, or a world not desperately behind on the SDGs at the halfway mark. Unfortunately, if anything, we've heard just more bad news, including that last year broke all previous records, possibly the warmest year in 100,000 years, nearly already reaching the 1.5 degrees limit set by countries in Paris in 2015. And water, this most vital of resources, is under tremendous pressure globally, certainly also here in India, with 16% of the world's population, but only 4% of its freshwater resources. Yet, we can still reverse course. We know what to do. The SDGs remain our roadmap and our North Star. From the G20 in New Delhi to the General Assembly in New York and COP28 in Dubai, last year closed with a strong call to step up multi-sectoral partnership efforts to meet these overlapping crises. India is playing a central role in this, advocating for a strong international enabling environment for sustainable development. We saw this with India's inclusive G20 presidency, which refocused global attention on getting the SDGs back on track and putting the voices of the Global South at the center. India's expanding South-South and triangular cooperation, including initiatives like the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster-Resilient Infrastructure, are also bringing together stakeholders from different sectors. India's own digital transformation, which has made it a world-class, a world leader in digital payments and financial inclusion, is a fantastic example of government and the private sector coming together. This unique digital public infrastructure also brings important impacts on poverty reduction and food security. And our UN agencies in India are using their extensive knowledge of the Indian development landscape to increasingly help identify and codify Indian best practices for the benefit of other countries. A true two-way partnership. A focus on systems-wide approaches, cutting across sectors, with partnerships at the center, is key to our new UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, the partnership offer for the next 5 years with the government of India. To give just a few examples, together with partners, the UN in India is helping to bring together corporations, business leaders, and professionals with purpose to put sustainability at the core of business and empower women and youth with 21st century and digital skills. We are catalyzing blended financial instruments towards meeting the SDG financing gap. Our UN agencies are supporting the Jal Jeevan mission and other major Indian water and sanitation initiatives. We are helping promote climate-informed gender equality initiatives and gender-based violence prevention. We are investing in community-led, just green transitions. For example, preparing women in the harsh salt harvesting sector to become solar technicians and take advantage of the massive renewable investments happening right now in India. And the UN is partnering with various Indian cultural events and institutions, soft power, from the International Indian Film Academy Awards to the Lakme Fashion Week Circular Design Challenge and the Jaipur Literature Festival and many others to promote sustainability and circularity through the power of arts and culture. Dear friends, to conclude, given the scale and the pace of development here at home and support to others through South-South cooperation, India truly is the country that is best positioned to make the SDGs a global reality. And the UN in India is proud to be a partner of choice in this journey, together with all of you. Thank you so much. Bahat Dhanyavad.
That was a heartwarming address from Mr. Shomdi Shah. I now welcome Mr. Satya S. Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet, a development economist, lawyer, and change maker with over 40 years of varied experience. Mr. Tripathi is also the Chancellor of Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences and Senior Distinguished Fellow on Innovative Finance at the World Agroforestry Center. He was most recently the UN Assistant Secretary General, head of the New York office at UN Environment. Mr. Tripathi, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shweta ji. Greetings, everyone. It's delightful to hear so many significant voices across the spectrum, from the Honorable Minister to my good friend Susan, who finishes, and congratulations, Susan, if you're still around. She completes 5 years with UNEP recently, I think. An amazing run and very meaningful contributions, I must say. And and Lin Yang, who brings the global perspective to ESCAP now. The point that all these speakers have made is both diverse and unified in terms of its focus and substance. So let me share a little bit of what I think are the biggest challenges for us as we move forward. I mean, the event has rightly been framed as the nexus between SDGs 1, 2, 13, and 17. And I would actually propose that the nexus is between all SDGs, because none of the SDGs will be achieved if we don't deal with poverty and climate change. Let me explain why I think that. Because if we do not deal with the challenge of climate change, poverty will only exacerbate. We know now that by 2030, from data from various sources, that 600 million people will still suffer from hunger by 2030. So, and that's a very significant number. We talk about India being a very important country at the forefront of implementing SDGs. And that is true, and India deserves all our appreciation and commendation. But at the same time, it is a fact that there's large-scale poverty in significant numbers of the population, which would run into hundreds of millions of people if you look at the World Bank data and the other poverty data. So while we must celebrate the great advances India has made in recent years, but this nagging problem of poverty and what happens to countries like India, Indonesia, Brazil, Nigeria, all the bigger countries in the climate conversation is something very important to keep in mind when we are discussing something about Nexus. And it is important because even though countries in the global north are making meaningful efforts now to bring down their carbon footprint, what is important to note that countries in the global south, countries that matter in terms of numbers and size and complexity, are actually at a place where they could easily be carbon neutral. They could easily get to net zero, actually. Because if you look at the IPCC recommendations, 2.1 tons per capita is the global carbon footprint that is net zero. And if you look at emissions of even countries like India, which is the third largest emitter in the world in terms of numbers, but if you break it down to people, it's pretty close to net zero, actually. But that's not the challenge. The challenge is Indian emissions are growing at 50% every decade. By 2030, it will be 6 billion tons. And then, if it grows like that, by 2050, the Indian emissions will be the same as, or even more as what the Chinese emissions are at this time. So that's where the challenge is, that how do you keep countries like India and the other bigger countries in the conversation from the global south to actually stay where they are? And I'm glad Susan brought up the work in Andhra Pradesh. I had the privilege of putting together an institution called the Sustainable India Finance Facility back in 2017 and do a big partnership with the then Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Chandrababu Naidu, and then subsequently very ably led by the current Chief Minister, Mr. Reddy. And that program, the world's largest natural farming program now, has actually converted 1 million farmers, mostly women, to zero chemical farming. There's no synthetic chemicals and pesticides. And actually it teaches us what is possible when you build a partnership. And that I was talking about SDG 17. We brought about 50 organizations to work with the government on that. And what has it resulted in? From 40,000 farmers back in 2017, now it is at 1 million farmers. It's saving 50% water, no fertilizers, no pesticides. The German Development Bank came forward and gave them a loan of 300 million euros already, and with 100 million disbursed at only 0.5% interest. And it is a 10-year loan. And actually, the Andhra Pradesh government is going to pay back the whole money without affecting its budget by 1 penny because they're saving all the subsidies. Andhra Pradesh alone, last year, the government of India's fertilizer subsidies were $31 billion annually. That was the number for 2022-23. And so that, when you bring it down to Andhra Pradesh level, it's about $1.5 billion. The electricity subsidy, because all the electricity that farmers use in Andhra Pradesh is actually 100% paid for by the state government. That's another $1.5 billion. And so when you stop spending that money and repurpose government expenditure for better things, for infant mortality, maternal mortality, school dropout, and there's all kinds of things you could spend that money on. And that's already happening. The PM Pranam scheme, which not sure if many of the audience is aware, it all stems from a study the Sustainable India Finance Facility did in partnership with Niti Aayog back in 2020 to actually prove that fertilizer subsidies are being avoided through biometrics and all kinds of information. And then it took almost 3 years, but now there is this scheme where actually when you avoid these subsidies, the government of India will pay back the state government 50% of the subsidy saved, and that's what is called the PM Pranam scheme, the Prime Minister's Pranam scheme, as they call it, and which is now official policy and regulation in the government, is that then the state government gets the money and they can then use that for advancing natural farming. And that's saving 50% water. The public health gains are exponential. There are 300,000 Nutri gardens, very small land parcels given to poor people that can actually grow their own vegetables and herbs that takes care of the family health, if I may. Susan mentioned about the tea agri-food study. Actually, we were the ones that went and requested the study leader, Pawan Sukhdev, who's the person that conceptualized tea back in 2007, 2008. And so they then got together with the Global Alliance for the Future of Food and the True Cost Accounting Accelerator in DC, and all of us together. That study is a lighthouse study because it shows that farmer incomes have gone up by 49%, while improving yields by 11%. The pesticide fertilizer lobby actually often makes the case that if you stop using fertilizers and pesticides, you will all starve to death. Not true. It is actually resulting in increased yields, proven by scientists of immense stature globally, and also reducing water use intensity by 50%, avoiding fossil fuel-based fertilizers, pesticides, electricity use has dropped by 50% on the farms, and of course, public health gains and ecosystem regeneration and rejuvenation at a scale never seen before. There are birds and bees nesting in the agricultural fields already, earthworms, centipedes, millipedes, all these proxy species that are the first to go away when you start using chemicals on a field are coming back with a vengeance. What's the point here? The point is that if you do the right thing, you can sequester soil organic carbon, you can improve public health, you can reduce poverty, you can regenerate ecosystems, and actually it can also unlock the bigger fortune for countries like India, which is we're working on something with the Global Carbon Council and trying to bring together a host of global actors to monetize carbon for the farmers. Farmers, if they want to go to the market now and sell it, carbon sells for about $20 a ton. We are creating a template where the farmers will sell it for at least $100 a ton. Because what we are saying is drawing from the old adage of the old school economics that money is what money does. We're saying carbon should be what carbon does. And so if you're withdrawing carbon from the atmosphere, that does nothing. Yes, it helps global warming, but it's too expensive and too little impact. You should be focusing on soil organic carbon sequestration because the pathway is absolutely amazing. It increases poverty, it increases prosperity of people at the bottom of the pyramid. It sends children to school. It puts women in power because when their economic conditions change, women make the right decisions. There's enough evidence. We don't need to debate that. When women have economic power, they make better decisions than men, especially in the agricultural landscapes. And we know that from thousands of studies that have been done. So to conclude, there are actually solutions. And we are now working with the government of Andhra Pradesh to create $1 billion, the world's first $1 billion regenerative agriculture lending facility, which will actually drive the money into taking it from 1 million farmers to 6 million farmers in Andhra Pradesh. That's the total number of smallholders in the state, and possibly even make Andhra Pradesh net zero ahead of major industrial economies like France, Germany, Italy, US, Canada, and what have you. So the possibilities are endless. The opportunities are there. We just need to build these virtuous partnerships, and the UN can play a very significant role. The institution I mentioned about Sustainable India Finance Facility has an embedded team of 26 persons actually based in Andhra Pradesh, working with the government and making the kind of cutting edge research it needs happen. And it was all set up with a small grant from UNEP back in 2017. Of course, UNEP doesn't support it now because it has numerous priorities, and once it started it, then it moved on to other things, but it continues, and the Global Alliance now fully funds the Sustainable India Finance Facility and its work in India. And we are so proud to be able to do it because the kind of impact we are seeing and the kind of possibilities, the Honorable Minister talked about the potential of different ideas. Shombi talked about blended finance, and I know that UNESCAP is also working on different ideas pertaining to blended finance. Now, here is the opportunity and potential for the rest of the world. While we are excited about creating this $1 billion lending facility for Andhra Pradesh, at the same time, we are even more excited about the replication value of the idea of what is working. You would be delighted to know that leadership and farmers from Mexico, Kenya, Rwanda, Bangladesh, Indonesia, literally every country that matters in the rest of the world in terms of agriculture are actually or have visited or actually visiting now the Andhra Pradesh Natural Farming Program and the amazing work that is happening there, completely led by women farmers, by the self-help groups of 10 women each. And it's extraordinary what women are able to achieve when they are empowered, when they are able to make decisions for themselves. And I say this very proudly, the women in Andhra Pradesh are actually going to save the world by creating the system scale examples that can be replicated across the landscape in every country, in every continent. And that is the kind of example that brings back into focus water and why water is significant, especially in agricultural contexts, in agricultural landscapes. So I want to thank my friend, Dr. Arvind Kumar and the India Water Foundation and my colleagues at the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet for hosting this event. Very meaningful, very purpose-driven, and couldn't have been at a better time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. And definitely any initiative that positively transforms the system should be scaled and replicated. And my next speaker is Ms. Dani Gallard-Spitzer. She's International Policy Advisor, Swedish Waterhouse, CV. She was previously Senior Specialist for Global Processes at GWP, linking thematic and policy work to global water and climate processes, including with UN bodies, the International Decade for Action, and other key partners. Prior to that, she served as Director of Policy and Programs for the World Water Council, where she worked extensively on conceptualizing and supporting multi-stakeholder change processes through the triennial Water Forums. She served as Vice Chair for the Global Framework on Water Scarcity in Agriculture and was a member of the WMO Hydrological Coordination Panel. Ms. Spitzer, please.
Your Excellencies, colleagues, thank you very much. I first would extend my gratitude to the organizers for the invitation to participate in this really interesting and rich event. The challenges are enormous, and partnerships are really the only way that we're going to overcome them, because they're more than what one organization can do individually. From the previous speakers, I just wanted to recognize that there seems to be two different discussions. I mean, one is very much about the global processes and the frameworks, and the other is the reality on the ground. I think what we have to do is to bring those two realities closer together. We have to recognize that the governance and the regulatory frameworks have to be put in place to enable the collective action on the ground, and both of these things have to work simultaneously together. As we also heard from many of the other speakers, these distinct challenges need to be seen as interconnected, as through a nexus approach. And as you may expect, me coming from the Stockholm International Water Institute, I would posit that water is actually the common denominator that connects poverty, food, and climate change. Quite simply put, with no water, there's no food. And when we waste food, then we waste water as well. And finally, none of our net zero targets, whatever they be, are going to be able to achieve without the required water for their achievement. I wanted to share two interesting pieces of intelligence that I've heard recently. First of all, the World Economic Forum came out with a report in December. It's called an Insight Report on Transforming the Global Food System for Human Health and Resilience. And in that document, they say, first of all, that diet is the single most important driver of health. So we have to bring that into well-being. 1 in 3 people experience some form of malnutrition in the world, and poor diet affects disproportionately the most vulnerable communities. Therefore, it needs to be prioritized. And if we look at the worldwide environmental damages that are caused by producing food, they're estimated at $7 trillion, and that includes biodiversity loss and water depletion. The second piece of intelligence that I wanted to share comes to us from the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. And they have found that 57% of the world's water consumption for crop production is unsustainable. So that means more water use for agriculture is unsustainable than it is sustainable. So I think that is really a trend that we have to reverse. The current agricultural system relies on these unsustainable production methods, and reliance on extensive irrigation puts stress on the limited freshwater resources that we have available. Not to mention the chemical inputs that further strain freshwater resources and pollute aquatic ecosystems. And obviously, we've had other speakers that spoke to that very eloquently. Cultivating a healthy and sustainable food system that can provide diverse, nutrient-dense food that is affordable and accessible and incentivizes healthy consumer choices will necessitate this paradigm shift that others have also mentioned. And it will depend on the availability of water for its success. It needs to take a broad, holistic approach to tackling these multiple challenges simultaneously, because business as usual will not get us to where we need to go, as Mr. Sharp has pointed out. With respect to partnerships and collective action, I just thought it would be valuable to briefly share my experience with curating discussions on water, food, and climate through the Water for Climate Pavilion at COP28. For me, this was an excellent example of what multi-stakeholder partnerships combined with political leadership can offer. The Water for Climate Pavilion is a collective of over 60 organizations that have established programming on water and climate issues during the course of the 2 weeks of the COP, and we've done this for 3 years in a row. So following an extensive consultation by the COP28 presidency, the international water community benefited from the important decision to dedicate a full day in the presidency program to draw attention to the issue of food, water, agriculture within climate. That was accompanied by the establishment of a high-level ministerial dialogue and the endorsement of the Emirates Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems, and Climate Action that was endorsed by 150 countries. the signatories of that declaration commit to integrating agriculture and food systems into their climate action, adopting inclusive policies, securing finance, promoting innovations, and strengthening international trade. So because that happened, there was a lot of other discussions that could happen, a lot of other conversations and initiatives that ultimately resulted in the inclusion of adaptation targets for both water and food systems in the final outcome document of COP28. But also they mentioned health, biodiversity, infrastructure, poverty eradication. So for me, this is clear recognition within the COP process that there's a need to work more holistically across silos, like one of the previous speakers mentioned. In addition to that, there are a number of other partnerships around food, water that were founded. In particular, the Partnership on Water Resilient Food Systems, which will be hosted by the UNFCCC Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. So while you have these political things going on, you have these collective action bodies that are trying to figure out how to do these things in practice. So in conclusion, just wanted to say that this multi-stakeholder collective action is incredibly valuable, but it needs to be championed politically. You need to have these two levels working at once. It needs also an enabling environment to make sure it succeeds. So that means it has sufficient human, technical, and financial resources, and the individual agency of passionate people like yourselves, and good inclusive governance practices that enable public participation so that everyone's voices can be heard in these processes. Fostering long-term resilience for societies will depend on these governance and sectors working together across scales, across silos, both horizontally and vertically. So very happy to continue these discussions as we move forward. There are a number of platforms that CWE hosts, and we would love to invite you to participate in those. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you very much. And we would love to be part of what you are inviting us to. Thank you so much. Our next speaker, last but not least, is Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Bhucher, who serves as a Senior Watershed Management Specialist at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, or which we call ICI mode. With nearly 3 decades of expertise, he has been actively engaged in various projects focused on piloting and scaling community-based and science-driven watershed management, as well as springshed management in the Hindu Kush Himalayas. Dr. Bhucher is currently managing the intervention to scale gender equal and socially inclusive springshed management at ICI. Dr. Bhucher, please.
Thank you, Shweta, for that introduction. So ICIMOD, as I said, is an intergovernmental organization, and we work in the 8 Hindu Kush Himalayan countries. And our focus is more on supporting through a transformative partnerships, a greener, more inclusive, and climate resilient Hindu Kush Himalayas. Well, the region, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, has a global importance, and I'll speak about it in a while, but it's also going through a crisis at a very rapid pace. The region is called as the third pole, and the reason being that it has one of the largest ice reserves, within this region, with about 54,000 glaciers spread across 60,000 square kilometers. And that's what gives this region a unique feature and makes it a global asset for food, energy, water, as well as cultural and biological diversity. And this crucial asset, it contributes to water, food, and energy security for a quarter of the humanity. But unfortunately, it is melting at an unprecedented rate. In fact, it's a rate which is 2 times faster than the global average warming. And if that continues, the predictions are that only 50% of the glaciers will be left if the current state of warming continues by 2100. And that's a big, big loss, which will not just be having implications for the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, where nearly 240 million people reside, but for nearly 2 billion people who actually live in the 10 river basins which originate from this region. We've also witnessing a significant decrease in the snow covers, both during summer and winter months, as well as the permafrost, which is such an important water resource, is thawing at a very fast rate. Now, all that is causing cascading hazards. Hazards which are in the form of glacier lake outburst floods. We've just witnessed one in Sikkim, India, where 82 people died. Nearly over 7,500 people got displaced by the floods, and many hydropower and other roads, bridges were washed away. So this is a phenomena that is happening, and this region, not just in India, but across Nepal, in Bhutan also, they are high risk, and many other countries of this region. Now, thawing of the permafrost is actually started affecting the ground stability. So ground is becoming unstable, which means the infrastructure is at risk. The hydrology is at risk because permafrost has a role to play in groundwater recharge. And when permafrost thawing happens, there are large emissions of carbon, thus adding to the global warming phenomenon. We are witnessing incessant rainfall here on hilly and unstable slopes, which is leading to landslides. And Nepal, where I work, we see so many landslides happening. In 2022, the country had a direct economic loss of nearly 88 million Nepalese rupees in 2022 due to landslides. And that's a huge, huge loss for a country. A silent crisis which is happening is the depletion of springs. And springs are the part of groundwater systems. And in this region, the HKH region, nearly 100 million people actually depend on springs for their drinking water, for domestic water, but also for irrigation and cultural needs. And they are drying at a rapid pace. Now, the Niti Aayog report of 2018 from India says nearly 50% of the springs in the Indian Himalayan region have either dried or in the process of drying up. Now, that's a big, big crisis happening, along with the rapid loss of the glaciers and other water forms. We've just done a spring mapping in Nepal across 2 municipalities, and we are seeing that nearly 20% of the springs across these municipalities have dried up. And people are facing acute water shortages, particularly during the lean seasons. This is a month, let's say from November up to June, when people face most water security because the springs and the spring-fed streams are drying up, and they have to depend on them for their daily livelihoods, but also for agriculture systems. So there are huge implications of such a phenomena. We've seen a massive biodiversity decline happening. Nearly 70% of the biodiversity in this region has been lost over the last century, which means biodiversity loss means there is a loss of ecosystem services, which could be provisioning, supporting, or cultural services. And this is also having an impact on the food security. If you see at the data, about 129 million farmers in the Indus, Ganges, and Brahmaputra basins actually depend on water from the glaciers, snowmelt, and spring-fed rivers to irrigate their crops in this region. But there is no dearth of solutions. Now, if we go to a remote village in Uttarakhand, India, for instance, you'll see communities are reviving their springs. They're reviving through a methodology using hydrogeological mapping, recharge area, bringing in gender, social, and governance inclusion aspects, and they're seeing springs are being revived, as well as their abandoned terraces, which
I'm sorry, Mr. Poocher, please, you'll have to conclude because we have already run out of time.
okay,
Yes, just one more minute, please.
Yeah, I'm aware of the time. It's okay. Thank you. We also seeing very good examples in Kavre, where there's a package of solutions of integrated pest management, low-cost water storage, etc., which farmers are adopting. If you go to Gilgit-Baltistan, people are using hydro-ram, zero emission techniques to lift water and bring their abandoned agricultural land into production again. And these are all initiatives that are led by women and the women groups. So a common features across these solutions is that there is a multi-stakeholder convergence happenings with government, academia, civil society, local communities coming together, and women taking leadership and a lot of capacity building happening. But the challenge is that these solutions need upscaling, scaling out with speed. And for that, there is still a strong need for enabling conditions in the form of policies, incentives, also transformed institutions which would support such new approaches. There is a need for behavioral change. A lot of people know about good practices and yet they are not adopting them because their attitude, the mindset remains the same. There is a need for regional and transboundary collaboration. Success stories in India can be very useful for Bhutan, Nepal, and vice versa. And lastly, sustainable financing. What we are witnessing is most of these good practices remain as islands of success because they are project mode, but sustainable financing does not happen so that such good practices can be continued and scaled up. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Poocher. I would like to unanimously thank all of our panelists. And we have to call for the implementation of inclusive, environmentally sustainable strategies that put the eradication of rural poverty at the center. A long-term holistic approach is needed to address structural problems such as political and economic shocks, unsustainable management of natural resources, and socio-economic exclusion. It's important to strengthen the interface between science, policymaking, and society to improve public-partner transparency, information sharing, and cross-sectoral collaboration, as well as bring together modern science and technology and indigenous, local, and community knowledge to find solutions that minimize trade-offs and balance the economic, environmental, and social dimensions of agri-food system transformations, and also proper and accurate data. We need greater recognition of farmers' organizations, NGOs, civil society organizations, academia, and others as key participants in national policy dialogues, along with appropriate financing, which every speaker has spoken about, to ensure the positive transformation can continue to be fully implemented. The crux of all discussions that we engaged in is that partnerships, if approached fully with the right set of metrics in place in a collaborative manner, can be the game changer which we seek. Thank you, dignitaries, India Water Foundation, and GASP are grateful to you for taking out time from your extremely busy schedule for us and gracing this event to deliberate on such a crucial topic. Thank you, my lovely audience, for wonderful remarks and some interesting information which you have shared. We shall get back to you with answers shortly. If you have any questions, please drop in the question chat box. Thank you, everyone, and have a very good night or morning as per your time zones. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.